The moment I zipped my suitcase shut, my entire world collapsed around me. I stood on the curb outside my old apartment building, watching my parents' sleek black SUV pull away into the afternoon traffic. Lisa and Charles Bolton were gone, off to enjoy their well-deserved retirement, while their daughter became homeless. 2 bags. That's all I had left. 2 bags and the echo of my mother's final words. Tough love is the only inheritance you'll get from us, Thea. Time to grow up. I turned around, taking one last look at the building I'd called home for 3 years. The eviction notice was still taped to the door of apartment 4C. Final. Irreversible. I'd called my parents that morning with hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Mom, Dad, I need help, just for a few weeks until I can. But my mother's voice had turned to ice. We raised you better than this, Thea. If you can't manage your own finances at 30 years old, that's a choice you made. We're not enabling your poor decisions. My father hadn't even gotten on the line. 20 minutes later, they'd shown up, not to help me pack, not to offer their guest room, but to make sure I understood that this was my rock bottom. My mother stood in the doorway of my empty apartment, perfectly coiffed hair catching the light, designer sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She looked around at the boxes, the scattered furniture I couldn't afford to move, the life I was abandoning, and she shook her head with that expression. The one that said, I'm disappointed but not surprised. You're a financial analyst, Thea, she said, her voice dripping with that honey-sweet condescension I knew so well. You work with numbers all day. How is it possible that you can't even manage your own rent? I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her about the layoffs, about the emergency dental surgery that maxed out my credit card, about the car accident that wasn't my fault but still cost me $3,000 in repairs because the other driver had no insurance. But I didn't, because with Lisa Bolton, explanations were just excuses, and excuses were weakness. So I smiled, nodded, thanked them for checking on me, even though they'd done nothing but lecture. That's what I always did with my parents. Smiled, thanked them, never pushed back, never asked why their version of family values didn't include actually helping their only daughter when she was droning. My father at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. He shifted his weight, hands in his pockets of his expensive slacks, eyes darting everywhere except at me. We should get going, Lisa, he mumbled. Traffic will be terrible. My mother gave me one more look, the kind that cataloged every failure, every disappointment, every way I didn't live up to the Bolton family image. And then she was gone. They both were. The SUV disappeared around the corner, and I was alone on the sidewalk with 2 bags and nowhere to go. Let me back up about 3 weeks, because I need you to understand how I got here, how I ended up standing on a city sidewalk, jobless and homeless, about to discover that everything I thought I knew about my parents was a carefully constructed lie. My name is Thea Bolton. I'm 30 years old. I worked as a financial analyst at a mid-sized investment firm in the city. Exciting stuff, I know. While other people dreamed about exotic vacations and wild adventures, I dreamed about perfectly balanced spreadsheets and accounts that made sense. My therapist says I use numbers to feel in control of a chaotic world. My therapist is probably right. 3 weeks ago, everything started falling apart. The layoffs came on a Tuesday. Restructuring, they called it. 12 people let go, and I was one. 2 years of exemplary performance reviews, of 60-hour weeks, of making my bosses look good. None of it mattered. I cleaned out my desk in 20 minutes and walked out of that building with a cardboard box and a severance package that would last exactly 2 months if I was careful. I was careful. I'd always been careful. That's what my parents taught me. Control your spending, save for emergencies, be responsible. I cut every expense I could, stopped Eve out, canceled subscriptions, started applying to every job posting that remotely matched my skills. But rent in the city doesn't care about your severance package. Neither does the student loan that's been following me since graduation, or the credit card bill from the dental emergency that I had to take care of or risk losing my teeth. The money ran out faster than I expected, and the callbacks from job applications never came. That's when I called my parents. Not immediately, I waited, because asking for help felt like admitting defeat, and the Boltons don't do defeat. But when the eviction notice appeared on my door, when I was down to my last $400, when I was staring at the very real possibility of sleeping in my car, I swallowed my pride and made the call. "We can't help you, Thea." My mother's voice was calm, measured, like she was declining an invitation to a mediocre restaurant. "You're an adult. Adults solve their own problems." "Mom, it's just temporary. A few weeks on your couch until I—" No. Flat. Final. The way she said it when I was a child and asked for something she'd already decided I couldn't have. "Your father and I worked hard for everything we have. We didn't get where we are by making excuses or asking for handouts. You need to figure this out yourself." The guest house. That's what killed me. They had a fully furnished guest house behind their main property, 1,200 square feet, 2 bedrooms, sitting completely empty except for the 2 weeks a year they used it when Charles's brother visited. I knew it was there. They knew I knew. I didn't even ask for it. I knew better. That morning, eviction day, started with a brutally sunny sky that felt like mockery. I loaded my 2 suitcases into my aging Honda, took one last look at the apartment, and called my parents one final time. Maybe they'd change their minds. Maybe they'd realize that tough love was just cruelty in disguise. They showed up, but not to help, to watch, to make sure I learned my lesson. Now, here I was, standing on the sidewalk, watching their taillights disappear. I had a phone with 8% battery, $400 in my checking account, 2 bags of clothes, and the address of a women's shelter that Google Maps told me was 40 minutes away by bus. I pulled out my phone to look up the bus schedule when it rang. Unknown number. Probably a spam call about my car's extended warranty or my non-existent credit card debt. I almost didn't answer. But something, maybe desperation, maybe the hope that it was a job callback, made me swipe to accept. "Is this Thea Bolton?" A woman's voice, professional, clipped. "Yes, this is Thea." "Ms. Bolton, this is Jennifer Park calling from First National Mortgage Services. I'm reaching out regarding account number 7743-8821-4490. We show 3 missed payments on the property at 2847 Lakewood Terrace, and we need to discuss your options before this goes to foreclosure proceedings." The world stopped. I stood there on the sidewalk, suitcases at my feet, evicted from my apartment, abandoned by my family, and this woman on the phone was talking about a mortgage, a property, missed payments. "I'm sorry," I said slowly, my analyst brain trying to process data that didn't compute. "I don't own any property. I've never owned property. I was just evicted from a rental apartment." A pause. The sound of typing. "According to our records, you co-signed on this loan 18 months ago. The property is a 4-bedroom, 3-bath residence with an attached garage, purchased for $785,000. The monthly payment is $4,200. Ms. Bolton, have you not been receiving our statements?" My blood turned to ice water in my veins. $785,000. $4,200 a month. 18 months ago? 18 months ago was I was still working, still living in my apartment, still believing my parents when they said they were so proud of how responsible I'd become. 18 months ago was right after my grandmother died and left that inheritance, the one my parents said they'd invest wisely for the family. "What's the address again?" I whispered. 2847 Lakewood Terrace. I knew that address. I knew it because I'd been there exactly once for exactly 2 hours when my mother invited me to see their new investment property. A rental property, she'd said, something to generate passive income in retirement. She'd walked me through the house, pointing out the high-end finishes, the imported tile, the chef's kitchen. "This is what smart financial planning looks like, Thea," she'd said. I'd never signed anything. I'd never been to a bank. I'd never even heard the word mortgage that day. But someone had signed something. Someone had put my name on a loan for nearly $800,000. Someone had been making payments for a year and then stopped. Someone had let it default while they watched their daughter get evicted from a $1,200 a month apartment. "Ms. Bolton, are you still there?" I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The sidewalk tilted under my feet. My voice cracked. "I need to see the paperwork, the original documents, everything." "I can email those to you. But, Ms. Bolton, I need to stress that this situation is urgent. If we don't receive payment within 10 days, the foreclosure process will begin, and this will significantly impact your credit for the next 7 years. You're looking at—" "My credit is already ruined," I said, and something cold and sharp settled in my chest where panic had been a moment ago. "Email me everything. Every document, every statement, every piece of paper connected to this loan. I want to see it all." Of course. What email address should I gave her my email, my hand steady now. The analyst in me was waking up, pushing past the shock, starting to see patterns, numbers, timelines, starting to see the shape of something that looked a lot like fraud. "Ms. Park," I said, "one more question. Who made the payments for the first 15 months?" More typing. "The payments came from a joint checking account under the names Lisa and Charles Bolton." There it was. My parents. My parents. The people who'd just told me they couldn't help, who'd watched me lose my home, who'd preached responsibility and self-sufficiency while I was sleeping on their guest room couch. No, wait, I wasn't even allowed to sleep on their couch. These people had taken out a loan in my name, lived in a house I didn't know I owned, made payments just long enough to establish the loan as legitimate, and then stopped. They'd let me drown while using my credit as their personal piggy bank. The phone call ended. I stood there on the sidewalk, suitcases at my feet, and I started to laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because the sheer audacity, the calculated cruelty, the precision of it was almost impressive. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd broken me down into someone desperate enough to disappear quietly, someone too humiliated to ask questions, someone who'd just accept that life had beaten her. They forgot one thing. I'm a financial analyst. I find patterns. I trace money. I uncover fraud for a living. And they just handed me the biggest case of my career. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single comment, and your support truly means the world to me. Now, back to what happened next. I sat down right there on the sidewalk, back against my suitcase, and opened my email on my dying phone. 7 new messages from First National Mortgage Services. Attachments. PDFs. Years of documents. I plugged in the portable charger I'd thankfully remembered to pack and started reading. The first document made my stomach turn. A mortgage application with my signature at the bottom. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close, really close. Close enough to fool a bank officer who'd never met me, but I could see it immediately. The way the T curved too sharply. The way the H connected to the E at the wrong angle. Someone had practiced, but they weren't perfect. My mother had always been artistic. She used to do calligraphy for wedding invitations as a hobby. Her hand was steady, practiced, precise. The second document was a joint ownership agreement listing me as the primary borrower and Lisa Bolton as the cosigner. There was my forged signature again, right next to hers. Perfectly legitimate, perfectly legal. The third document was a copy of my driver's license, my social security card, and my pay stubs from 18 months ago when I was still employed. Documents I'd never given anyone, documents that had been sitting in a filing cabinet at my parents' house since I asked them to hold on to some important papers when I moved apartments 3 years ago. They'd been planning this for years. I kept scrolling. Bank statements showing the monthly $4,200 payments coming from an account in my parents' names. 15 months of payments, regular as clockwork, establishing a perfect payment history. Then nothing. 3 months of default. Late fees piling up, my credit score cratering. And there, at the bottom of one email, was something I almost missed. A forwarding address change request filed 6 months ago, redirecting all mortgage statements from my apartment to a P.O. box I'd never heard of. They'd been intercepting my mail. How many other bills had they redirected? How many job rejection letters had never reached me? How many opportunities had I missed because I never received the follow-up emails, the interview requests, the callbacks? My hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, from rage. Cold, calculated, methodical rage. I stood up, grabbed my suitcases, and started walking. Not toward the shelter, toward the bus stop that would take me to the public library, where I could use their computers, their printers, their internet. Because if my parents thought I was going to disappear quietly into poverty and shame, they were very, very wrong. I'd spent 2 years analyzing financial crimes for my firm. I knew how to trace money laundering, how to spot shell companies, how to find hidden assets. I knew the difference between sloppy fraud and sophisticated fraud. This was sophisticated, which meant they'd left a trail. A digital paper trail that they thought they'd covered, but hadn't. Not quite well enough. Not from someone who knew exactly where to look. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Hope you're finding a place to stay. Remember, Thea, sometimes the best lessons are the hardest ones. Love, Mom." I stared at that message for a long moment. At the heart emoji. At the word love typed by a woman who just watched her daughter become homeless while hiding an $800,000 fraud under her perfect manicure. Then I screenshot it, saved it, and added it to my growing folder of evidence. They wanted to teach me a lesson? Fine. Class was in session, and they were about to find out what happens when you underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose and everything to prove. I walked into that library with 2 suitcases and $400. I walked out 3 hours later with a plan that would cost them everything. I spent that first night in my car, not at the shelter. I couldn't do it. Couldn't walk through those doors and admit I'd fallen that far. So I parked in a 24-hour grocery store lot, reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go, and tried to sleep while my mind spun through mortgage documents and forged signatures. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face. That perfect, disappointed expression she'd perfected over 30 years of motherhood. The way she'd looked at my empty apartment like it was a crime scene, and I was the criminal. My phone buzzed at 6 a.m. Another email from the bank. This one had a subject line that made my stomach drop. Urgent. Foreclosure timeline and credit impact notice. I sat up, rubbing my neck, and opened it. The house was scheduled for auction in 43 days. After that, The bank would pursue legal action against me for the remaining balance, roughly $740,000 after the sale. Wage garnishment, asset seizure, a judgment that would follow me for decades. I was staring at financial obliteration for a house I'd never lived in, a loan I'd never signed, a debt that would destroy any chance I had of rebuilding my life. That's when the second email arrived. Same bank, different department. Subject, property insurance lapse notice. My hands started shaking before I even opened it. The homeowner's insurance had been canceled 3 weeks ago. Non-payment, which meant if anything happened to that house, fire, flood, break-in, there was no coverage, just more debt added to a nightmare I didn't create. I called the bank, got transferred 4 times, finally reached someone in the risk management department who explained, in the bored tone of someone who'd had this conversation 1,000 times, that I was personally liable for the property until foreclosure was complete. So, if someone breaks in and gets hurt, you could be sued, yes. If there's a fire, you'd be responsible for the damages to neighboring properties, yes. I hung up, sat there in my car surrounded by grocery store shoppers loading their trunks with normal things like milk and bread and toilet paper, and realized my parents hadn't just committed fraud, they'd built me a ticking time bomb. Then my phone rang again. Unknown number. My finger hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. Thea Bolton? A man's voice this time. Deep. Official. Yes? This is Detective Marcus Webb with the Financial Crimes Unit. We need to talk about your mortgage. Detective Webb wanted to meet in person. Coffee shop on 5th Street, 30 minutes. I almost said no. Walking into a police interrogation when you're homeless and accused of mortgage fraud felt like stepping into quicksand. But then he said something that changed everything. Ms. Bolton, you're not the first person to call us about Lisa and Charles Bolton. You're the third. The third. I drove to that coffee shop running on pure adrenaline and the last protein bar in my glove compartment. Webb was waiting at a corner table, mid-50s, tired eyes that had seen too many people lie to his face. He slid a folder across the table before I even sat down. Open it. Inside were 2 police reports. The first was from a couple named the Hendersons, filed 8 months ago. They'd hired my father's construction company to renovate their kitchen. $45,000 down payment. The work never started. When they tried to sue, they discovered Charles Bolton Construction LLC had dissolved 3 weeks after they'd signed the contract. The money vanished into shell accounts they couldn't trace. The second report was from my mother's former business partner, a woman named Janet Reese. They'd run a boutique consulting firm together. When Janet's mother died and left her $200,000, my mother convinced her to invest it all in expanding the business. 2 months later, my mother withdrew from the partnership, taking the investment with her. The business bank account? Cleaned out. The consulting contracts? All under my mother's new Solo LLC. I stared at those reports, my hands going numb. How much did they take? From these 2 cases, $250,000, roughly, but those are just the ones who filed reports. Webb leaned forward. Your parents are sophisticated. They target people who trust them, friends, family, business partners. They use legitimate-looking paperwork, real companies that exist just long enough to seem credible, then disappear. My throat closed. And the mortgage? My mortgage? Different play, same game. They needed a big score, and you were perfect. Good credit, stable income history, not paying attention. He paused. They lived in that house for 15 months rent-free, then stopped paying and walked away. Clean. Except you didn't walk away, did you? I shook my head. Couldn't speak. Webb pulled out another document. My mother's signature, dated 2 weeks ago, on a property deed transfer form, selling the house to herself under a different LLC name. They're trying to buy it at foreclosure, he said quietly, using a shell company. They'll steal it twice, once from you, once from the bank. My vision blurred. Can you arrest them? Not yet. We need more evidence, concrete proof linking them to the shell companies, to your forged signature. His eyes locked on mine. We need someone on the inside, someone they trust. The coffee shop walls pressed in on me. You want me to go back to them? You want us to get what we need to put them in prison. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother's number. Just 2 words. Come home. I stood outside my parents' house at sunset, Detective Webb's wire taped under my shirt, feeling like I was walking into my own execution. The house looked exactly the same. Perfect landscaping, perfect paint job, perfect lie. My mother opened the door before I could knock. Thea! She smiled like nothing had happened, like she hadn't watched me become homeless 3 days ago. I'm so glad you came. We need to talk about your situation. My situation. The audacity made my teeth hurt. She led me to the kitchen where my father sat with papers spread across the granite island. Contract documents, legal forms, and there, right in the center, a single-page agreement with my name already typed at the bottom. We've been doing some thinking, my mother said, pouring herself wine like this was a casual catch-up. About the mortgage issue. We want to help. I forced myself to stay calm. Help how? My father cleared his throat. We made some mistakes with the property paperwork. Administrative errors, really. But we can fix this if you sign a transfer of liability form. It shifts the debt responsibility to us, clears your credit entirely. You walk away clean. I picked up the form, hands steady, even though my heart was trying to break through my ribs. It wasn't a transfer of liability. It was a quitclaim deed. If I signed this, I'd be officially giving them the house, the one they'd bought in my name, the one they were about to buy again at foreclosure through their shell company. They were trying to tie up loose ends, erase me from the paper trail entirely. There's just one thing, I said slowly, pretending to read. I need to see the original mortgage documents, the ones I supposedly signed. My lawyer says I should have copies. My mother's smile froze. Lawyer? Well, yes, when you're facing $740,000 in debt, you get a lawyer. I looked up at her. You understand? The room went cold. My father and mother exchanged a look that made my skin crawl, a look that said I'd just made a terrible mistake. My father stood, walked to his office, and came back with a locked metal file box. He set it on the counter between us. Everything's in here, he said quietly. But Thea, once you open this box, once you see what's inside, there's no going back. Some things are better left alone. His hand was still on the box, not letting go. Are you sure you want to know the truth? I reached for the box. The darkness lasted 3 seconds. Long enough for my father to grab the file box and my mother to step between me and the door. When the lights flickered back on, everything had changed. Power surge, my father said, but his hand was on his phone. He'd triggered something. My mother's smile was gone. You're wearing a wire, aren't you? My blood stopped. The recording device under my shirt suddenly felt like a bomb. I don't know what you... Thea. Her voice was soft, almost pitying. You think we didn't know? Detective Webb called us 2 hours before he called you. Professional courtesy. We've been cooperating with his investigation into mortgage fraud in the area. She tilted her head, helping him identify victims of identity theft. The floor dropped out from under me. Detective Webb wasn't investigating them. He was working with them. "The wire's not transmitting anymore, by the way," my father added, almost gently. "Signal jammer. Installed it last year when your mother's business partner started asking questions. Very useful device." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The entire meeting had been a setup. Webb, the reports, the other victims, all manufactured to see what I knew, what I had, who I'd told. My mother opened a laptop on the counter, turned it toward me. Security footage. Me breaking into their home office 2 nights ago when they were supposedly at a charity dinner. Me photographing documents. Me stealing the file with the forged signatures. Breaking and entering. Theft of private documents. And now attempted fraud, trying to extort your own parents with fake evidence. She clicked to another video. Me at the bank this morning, talking to a loan officer, asking about applying for a false police report. Every move I'd made, documented, twisted. "Here's what's going to happen," my mother continued, sliding the quit-claim deed toward me. "You're going to sign this, you're going to apologize for making false accusations, and you're going to check yourself in to Riverside Psychiatric Facility for a voluntary 72-hour evaluation." She paused. "They're expecting you. Your history of erratic behavior, the paranoid delusions about your loving parents, the breakdown after losing your job, it's all documented." I stared at the commitment papers next to the deed. My signature, my real signature this time, required on both. "And if I don't?" My father set his phone on the counter. A video queued up. Me in their house yesterday slipping something into my pocket, except I hadn't taken anything. But the video showed me taking a diamond bracelet, the one currently sitting in their unlocked jewelry box upstairs. "Felony theft," my mother said. "With your current financial situation, a desperate act. Very believable." My hands were shaking. They'd thought of everything, every angle, every escape route blocked. I picked up the pen. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just a photo, a screenshot of an email from my mother to someone named Marcus Webb, dated 3 years ago. The subject line, ongoing financial arrangement, monthly retainer. Detective Webb wasn't working with them recently. He'd been on their payroll the entire time. And whoever just texted me that proof wasn't supposed to have it. I didn't sign. I stared at that mystery text, at the 3-year retainer proof, and something cold and sharp settled in my chest. "I need to use the bathroom." My mother's eyes narrowed. "You have 60 seconds." I locked the bathroom door, hands shaking as I typed back to the unknown number. "Who are you?" 3 dots. Then, "Janet Reese's daughter. My mother didn't invest in a business. She invested in a Ponzi scheme. I've been tracking your parents for 2 years. I have everything. Trust me." Another message. "Anniversary party. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Their house. All their friends, all their investors. I'll be there. So will the FBI. The real FBI." My mother pounded on the door. "Thea!" I flushed the toilet, steadied my breathing, and opened the door. "I'll sign, but I need 24 hours to move my things out of storage, close my bank accounts properly. You win. I just want this over." I watched my mother's face relax into something uglier than her fake smile. Satisfaction. She thought she'd broken me completely. "The party tomorrow night," my father said. "Come at 7. We'll finalize everything then, as a family. I left their house with unsigned papers and a plan that could either save me or destroy me completely. The next evening, I walked into their anniversary party wearing my only good dress and a new wire, this one from an FBI agent named Sarah Richard, who'd shown up at my car at dawn with Janet's daughter, Emma Reese. Emma was a federal forensic accountant. She'd been building a case for 2 years, waiting for the right moment. They're hosting this party to celebrate the foreclosure auction, Emma explained. They bought your house through the shell company for $320,000, half its value. They'll flip it next month for $750,000, pure profit on your destroyed credit. Agent Richard handed me a small device. We need you to get your father talking about the shell company, about the other properties. He drinks at these parties. He brags. The house was packed with people I recognized. Family friends, business associates, people who thought Lisa and Charles Bolton were pillars of the community. Champagne flowed, catered food, a banner that read 30 years of love and success. I found my father by the bar, exactly where Emma said he'd be. 3 drinks in, loose and confident. "Thea!" He pulled me into a hug that smelled like expensive whiskey. "I'm glad you came. Glad you saw reason." "I wanted to understand," I said quietly, "how you did it. The properties, the shell companies. It's actually impressive." His eyes lit up. Men like my father loved being admired for their intelligence, even by the people they destroyed. "It's all about the LLC structures," he started, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You create the company, run it clean for 18 months to build credit history, then you leverage that rating to—" The front door crashed open. FBI agents poured in, a dozen of them, vests with 3 bright letters, FBI. Agent Richard at the front, warrant in hand. "Charles and Lisa Bolton, you're arrested for wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit mortgage fraud." The room erupted, champagne glasses hitting the floor, screaming. My mother's face went white, then red, then something beyond rage. She turned to me, and for the first time in my life, I saw her mask shatter completely. "You?" she hissed. "You did this? After everything After everything you what?" My voice was steady now. Calm. "After you forged my signature? After you stole my credit? After you tried to lock me in a psych ward?" I stepped closer. "You forgot one thing, Mom. You taught me to be meticulous, to check every number, to never trust anyone." Agent Richard pulled out a laptop, turned it toward the crowd of horrified party guests. "We're seizing all assets purchased with fraudulent funds. That includes this house." My father lunged toward the stairs, toward his office. 2 agents tackled him before he made it 3 steps. He hit the marble floor hard, and something fell out of his jacket pocket. A passport. Not his American one. Something else. A second identity. Agent Richard picked it up, examined it. Her face went grim. "We need to lock this scene down, now." She turned to me. "Thea, how many properties did your parents own?" 3 that I know of. We found 18 across 4 states, all purchased with fraudulent loans under different names. Then she paused. "And we found wire transfers to overseas accounts, over $3 million moved in the last 6 months. $3 million. My parents weren't just con artists. They were running. They'd been preparing to disappear, to leave the country with millions, while I drowned in debt and psychiatric commitments. They were going to erase me and vanish." My mother was screaming now, fighting the handcuffs, shouting about lawyers and false arrests and wrongful prosecution. My father just stared at me with empty eyes, not angry anymore, just calculating, like he was already working on his next move, his next escape. Agent Richard leaned close.
The DA wants to talk to you. They're offering full immunity and witness protection if you testify. Your parents had partners, bigger fish. This goes way deeper than mortgage fraud. How deep? Political deep. Their client list includes 2 state senators and a federal judge. The room spun. This wasn't just my parents. This was a network. Emma Reese appeared at my side, her hand on my shoulder. Your mother's case? Your grandmother's inheritance? We found 7 more families they targeted. Your parents specialized in elderly victims, people in hospitals, nursing homes, people too sick to check their bank accounts. I thought about my grandmother, about the inheritance my parents said they'd invest wisely, about her last months alive, too weak to sign documents, while my mother held her hand and whispered about family and trust and love. "We need the house seized now," Agent Richard said into her radio. "Get a forensics team to the office. Pull every hard drive."
That's when I heard it. A sound from upstairs. A door closing softly in a house that was supposed to be cleared. Every agent froze. "I thought you secured the second floor," Richard hissed to her partner. "We did. It was empty." Another sound. Footsteps. Someone was still in the house. Agent Richard drew her weapon, signaled to her team. 3 agents moved toward the stairs, moving fast and silent. I grabbed Emma's arm. Who else knew about tonight? "Just us, and—" Her face went pale. "Detective Webb. We had to notify local PD as a courtesy." Webb, the man on my parents' payroll for 3 years, the man who tried to trap me, the man who just found out his cash flow was about to be cut off and his crimes exposed, the man who had nothing left to lose. An agent's voice crackled over the radio. "We've got someone in the master bedroom, male, armed. He's—" The gunshot was so loud it seemed to stop time. Then screaming, agents shouting, radio chaos, someone yelling, "Officer down!" And my mother laughing, actually laughing through her tears, her handcuffs, her ruined party. "You stupid girl. You think this ends with arrests? You think exposing us fixes anything?" Her eyes were wild, bright. "You just signed your own death warrant. Marcus isn't the only one on our payroll, and some of them are standing in this room right now." Agent Richard spun, looking at her own team. "Nobody moves. Nobody." My phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. Not Emma's this time. Just 2 words and a photo. "Check upstairs." The photo was from inside the house, from inside the master bedroom. Taken 30 seconds ago, it showed Detective Webb lying on the floor, not shot, but holding a gun, and standing behind him, wearing an FBI vest, was someone I recognized from the party, one of the agents who just arrested my parents, one of the people who was supposed to be on my side. The text came again. "How do you know who to trust when everyone's on the payroll?" Agent Richard's radio screamed static, then cut out completely. Every radio in the room died at once. The lights flickered. Emma grabbed my hand. "We need to leave, right now." But the front door was blocked by agents I couldn't identify anymore. The back door was locked from the outside. And somewhere in this house full of FBI agents and party guests and my arrested parents, someone was hunting. Someone who knew I had the evidence to bring down everyone. My father caught my eye across the room and smiled. "You wanted the truth, Thea?" he called out, his voice carrying over the chaos. "The foreclosure of the soul isn't about losing property. It's about realizing your entire life was built on lies. Every person you trust, every authority figure you believe in, every system you think will save you." The lights went out completely. In the darkness, someone grabbed my arm, pulled me toward the kitchen. A voice I didn't recognize whispered, "If you want to survive this, stop trusting the badge and start trusting the criminal. I know where they hid the real evidence, and I know who's coming for you next." "Who are you?" A phone screen illuminated a face. Not an agent, not Emma, someone else entirely. "I'm the person your parents ruined before you, and I've been waiting 5 years for this moment. Now we run, or we die here together."
Gunshots erupted somewhere behind us. Not one, multiple. Automatic weapons. This wasn't an arrest anymore. This was a war.